I guess if you want to say that any book that has romance in a fantasy setting is a romantasy, then you can go ahead and call it that. But like hell, in that case, First Law is a grimdark romantasy, and I don't think that is quite true. Hello, everybody. I am Rue, and this is my YouTube channel, Rue with the Books. I hope that you are having an absolutely fantastic day today. If you've been here before, then I'm glad to have you back. And if you're here for the first time, then welcome. We talk a lot of book stuff here. In this video, I am going to be talking about The Last Fire Hunter by Salinee Goldenberg, an absolutely smashing and criminally underrated debut fantasy book. Before I start yapping about this fantastic book, be sure to press the like button to help me out with the algorithm. Every like helps out tremendously. And while you're down there, be sure to press that subscribe button too if you like books and booktube content. I am consistent and upload twice a week, so by pressing that button, you get the benefit of consistent content straight into your YouTube feed. Be sure to grab a delicious beverage of your choice. I have coffee. It's cold, and we don't like the cold here, so get your cold resistance up with something hot and delicious to give you some companionship alongside this video. And without further ado, let's get into the review. This book is about X, a fire hunter who is seeking to earn his true demon badge by hunting down the legendary demon Shah Allah, a demon that induces horrible nightmares into its victims, locking them down and then feeding on their fear and on their body. What is a fae and what is a true demon? Let's start by unpacking that. A fae is essentially a ghost who can't move on and reincarnate because they are facing karmic punishment. The fae form that they take is based on what sins they are guilty of, and each fae is unique. So, for example, dogs are dogs, but there are different varieties of dogs, and a dog of any variety is then unique to the variety itself. So, for example, if you take Dachshunds, no one Dachshund is the same to another, or no golden retriever is the same as another golden retriever. So it kind of goes without saying that how you live your life dictates your afterlife in this world. A true demon is a fae that essentially hasn't learnt its lesson and continued to commit awful sins even in its afterlife, and lost any shred of humanity that they had left. They're like really, really evil fae. They have their own powers and abilities that they've obtained from kind of living in evil for such a long time. With that cleared up, let's go back to the plot. As X is hunting fae, he crosses paths with Arinya, a pregnant ex-Wyboran champion who enlists his help in crossing the fae-infested forest to reach a witch, and to convince him, she offers him a large sum of money. He is in need of funds because the Hunters Guild that he is a part of, they basically get by on the earnings of the individual hunters in the guild. So in need of money because his last few fae hunts have not been very lucrative, he cannot refuse and thus begins their adventure together. After reaching the witch, certain events play out that cause their paths to continue to cross. They must journey together on a path far more perilous, far more sinister than previously. They must hunt down Shah Allah, and they must survive a journey against both monsters and men. This book is kind of like a mix of the Witcher series and the Monster Hunter games, set in a Thai-inspired world. Very creative. The main character, X, is this kind of awkward but lovable goofball. Hunting things in this world takes a lot of time and patience, so his job is very isolating. This means he has a lot of alone time, and he doesn't really get to train and practice with his social muscles all that much. Therefore, there are a lot of funny and awkward moments where he doesn't really read social cues very well. X is a bit of a stickler for the rules. An aspect of him being part of this monster hunter order means that he cannot harm human beings because he has taken an oath not to do so. There are a lot of mean and bully type characters around in various towns and villages that he adventures through, and so X finds himself in sticky situations quite a lot because people are starting a beef with him, but he can't really fight back. All he has is his words, and as they say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. He's very interesting in moments like these because he can't just take these things lying down, and rather than be tactful and avoid conflict, he tries to verbally damage these bullies, and that ends up putting him in more trouble than he was in before. It's quite funny because he has a lot of wit, and he has some absolutely great comebacks. I love characters that act in this way. For example, Kellen in the Spellslinger series by Sebastian de Castell is a bit like this. These characters that just cannot stop running their mouths for the lives of them are some of my favorite in the fantasy genre. X feels really authentic, patriotic, and brave because he chose a career in a dying trade or craft. Becoming a fire hunter isn't as easy as just going through a job interview. It's a job that involves a lot of trials before you can actually become a fire hunter. And these trials, they put the body under a lot of emotional, physical, and mental stress. I'll talk more about it in the magic section. What I'm getting at here is that he chose a very, very difficult path for his life. To keep something alive that is very, very important to the culture of the country that he finds himself in, that he lives in. He wants to keep his culture alive, and he kind of wants to be part of that identity. He embraces aspects of his country that people are starting to forget, and that modernity is willing to shove out of the way for, societal progress. The second major character in this book is Arinya. I absolutely loved her because she is an absolute badass. She isn't some fragile woman who lets herself get trampled on by others. She is ready to fight to help those close to her, but also to fight for what is right, fight for what deserves to be hers. I think you can really draw a message from her character that progress sometimes requires diverging from the written path and embracing the fact that you have to do something difficult for the situation to change. She used to be a Muay Baran fighter, which is kind of like a more ancient form of Muay Thai. So this means that she's trained a lot and is really, really talented at fighting people off. She has this kind of tough, hardy exterior that means that she's, got some resilience and thick skin and can deal with these difficult situations. But underneath all that, she is still a very kind and empathetic person. So it's very interesting to see how she reacts in certain situations and how she deals with all these different things. Those are the two major characters that I wanted to talk about. Of course, there are other characters. There is other fire hunters. There is like the nobility of the country, and there's kind of like these spirits based on Thai folklore, and like kind of like guardians of forests and swamps and stuff like that. I'm not going to talk too much about the aspect of their characters because I don't want to spoil, and leave some things for you to be able to discover and enjoy about all these, interesting figures in this story. The world building in this book really sets it apart from the crowd, in my opinion. It's not a super long book, at least for the fantasy genre, so it doesn't go over the top in the ways that something like a Wheel of Time book does, with double the number of pages, but it does do quite a lot to paint a picture of the world in a relatively short number of pages. It's a vibrant and lush Thai-inspired world. which I think is very unique in its own right. There are these gorgeous shrines and temples scattered across towns and cities, giving it that Asian aesthetic, as well as these mouth-watering descriptions of Thai food. There is even a talk about the kind of various types of clothes that Thai people wear because they are well suited to the climate and environment. You can tell that the author really, really loves the cuisine and the culture and is really proud of it. I think Goldenberg might have, Thai heritage. I think that the various tattoos that the fire hunters are given, or badges as they are called in the book, are a nod to traditional Thai tattoos. And how it works is when a hunter achieves something, that achievement is then tattooed into their skin to show other hunters what they have achieved, what their accolades are, and things like that. So, think, for example, like the medals that a soldier might have for their accomplishments on the battlefield. The various types of Fai encountered in this story seem to be inspired by real creatures that are discussed within Thai folklore, such as the Fai Fa and the Krasu. These kinds of things are something I had absolutely no knowledge about, so it was super, super cool to learn about them and get a little bit of information and exposition about them throughout the story. I'll go more in depth about it in the next section, but the magic system serves to add onto the world building in this book because the magic system also feels quite authentic to a Thai world by incorporating aspects of Buddhism. The characters tend to forage for supplies to make concoctions of different types that aid them in their job of performing various rituals. And I think this connection to nature and the kinds of plant life that you would find in that country is really, really cool. And once again, serves to contribute to the world building. So, to sum up this section, the author goes really hard on making this fantasy book feel like it's set in an olden Thailand by incorporating aspects of culture, cuisine, folklore, and religion. I think the magic system in this book is super cool, and that is quite different to a lot of other fantasy books and series because it doesn't have kind of like specific powers or rely on elemental magic or anything kind of novel like as an offshoot of that. It bases itself in something far more spiritual, and I think that's really interesting. The fire hunters undergo all these various trials to be able to access different dimensions by going into different kinds of trances. Some of these dimensions can be reached quite easily, while others require more preparation, more time, and more resources by utilizing things such as herbal remedies and concoctions, or even go as far as using poisons to, draw a person to such a kind of extreme state. While in these dimensions, they're able to hunt fight easier. They have better reactions. They are stronger or faster. And there are even different dimensions which allow fire hunters to do different things or kind of let them be able to see different kind of creatures and stuff. So it's kind of quite layered and there's a lot of depth and complexity to it. And I would love to see that aspect explored even more in the next book. At the start of the book, the magic system doesn't make very much sense. Not because it's confusing, but just because the language used is very, very foreign. At least it was for me, because I don't have much understanding of Thai culture. However, if you can stick with it as you get further and further into the book, it does become quite simple. It's not a very hard magic system to grasp. It's just there was kind of a bit of a knee-jerk reaction for me at the start because I wasn't well acquainted with all of these different words and stuff. But yeah, I mean, overall, as I said, I think it's a really cool magic system, and I've really enjoyed reading about it. The Last Fight Hunter has a really cool premise with the fight stuff. I do, however, kind of wish that it leaned a little bit more into it because the author came up with such a brilliant idea for a magic system and then just didn't utilize it quite enough for me. The fight that X encounters throughout most of the story are almost harmless, apart from Shara. And so I wish that Salinee Goldenberg presented maybe a couple of Fi that were a bit more dangerous and posed a bit more threat and challenge to X, to give an opportunity to actually utilize that magic system more. And with the way that Shara is set up as a villain, it's not a traditional fisticuffs and swordplay kind of battle either, which I was hoping for because it would have been maybe a bit more exciting for me. I think that the way that it's resolved kind of is quite intelligent and uses a lot of logic and things like that. And so it just wasn't as exciting as it could have been. It's been a bit of a while since I have read a fantasy book with elements of romance. The genres on Goodreads for this book say that it is a romantasy, and I guess if you want to say that any book that has romance in a fantasy setting is a romantasy, then you can go ahead and call it that. But like hell, in that case, First Law is a grimdark romantasy, and I don't think that is quite true. I don't want to call it a romantasy because while the romance between X and Arinya did take up a decent amount of page space, it was a fantasy story with a romance subplot rather than a romance story with fantasy elements wrapped around it. I hope that makes sense. I'm not particularly well acquainted with romantasy, so if I'm wrong, then I'm sorry. I will throw it out there that this book is definitely for adults. It's not written to be a smutty book, but there are some spicy scenes for sure. Anyway, that tangent aside, it is a pretty good romance in my opinion. It isn't love at first sight or anything, but the characters, as they spend time together, they bond and develop feelings for one another. It's not kind of like a instantaneous thing. It is very, very gradual. Add on to the fact that they go through some pretty extreme things together and do so much for one another. Well, you get it. It does feel convincing. The pacing of the plot felt right. It slowed down at times to give us some time to connect with the characters, but it never slowed down so much that it became a chore to continue reading. It did the same for world building. We experience the world through the way that X interacts with it and through what he sees and experiences. So it feels like we are exploring the world and learning about it through him. As far as I remember, there wasn't any like long lore dumps or expositions to do with the world building. It does feel pretty authentic. It is also a dual POV story, so if you enjoy that kind of aspect, you can expect it in this book, although the second POV is kind of just a side character that ends up becoming relevant within the story of the main characters. So it's just kind of a little different perspective to keep things fresh and keep you on your toes, but it's not something that is it doesn't take up like a major amount of page space. Towards maybe 70 or 80% of the book, I was starting to feel a little bit of fear that the romance was going to overwhelm the story and take over. But Salinee Goldenberg masterfully interwove everything in a way that made sense and brought the plots back to be front, back, and center in a way that had me gripped and at the edge of my seat towards the end, and really invested in the outcomes of these characters. After my initial fear, Salinee brought the story in an interesting direction that I had not expected. She had a fantastic idea about it and really took the reins with it. It elevated the stakes, it had me really invested in the characters and had me wondering how on earth would the situation be diffused. Well, I had no complaints in regards to the ending because it was absolutely phenomenal and ultimately very satisfying. The ending is great and it leaves some wiggle room for the second book, which I believe is coming in January, unless the plans change, and I would be very, very interested in reading it. I enjoyed a lot of elements in the story, including the plot and the characters, the world building, and the magic system. My only criticism, and I hope that is sorted out in the second book, is that I really, really wanted to lean more into that kind of monster hunting aspect, because that is the trade, the craft of the main character. And what I feel this book was lacking was some solid action scenes which utilize the magic system. So long as the author can do that in the next book, it generally could be 5 stars out of 5 if it maintains everything that I liked about this one. So overall, I rate this book 4 stars out of 5. Thank you for watching my video. If you have made it this far, I hope that you get a good fortune in a fortune cookie today. I picked up this book at the library and was really surprised with how good it was. We got an interesting magic system with some fantastic world building, a gripping plot with some great characters. If you have read this book, did you like it and did you agree with my opinions? If you haven't read this book, did I convince you that it's worth picking up? I would also love to hear what you're currently reading, so let me know in the comments down below. Please press that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. I'm trying to build a nice community to talk about books with. You can be part of the journey and the community if you choose to do so. I'm still trying to figure out the social media thing. I'm pretty active on Goodreads and I'm working on figuring out how to interact with Instagram and TikTok. You can find the links to those in the description below and choose to connect with me there as well. Anyway, until next time, Rue out.